Um, I'm just reading this Politico article that is posted on the subreddit.
Um,
Um,
yeah. What is that? I
I
didn't get
mean,
to hear too much of what you were talking about yet.
well, it's just kind of trying to go about like it's they're trying to explain how Trump made inroads with Latinos
Okay.
when he's so obviously racist, right? And they're
Well, yeah.
I, they're not they're not just like flippantly blaming it on socialism and then moving on like a lot of them tried to do.
But that's like their go-to move.
Yeah, but they're
That
interviewing
I
people
mean,
who actually were organizing on the
uh huh.
ground,
So what
like strategists and stuff.
did they expand outside the well to figure out a different a different reason?
Um, like kind of. I mean, they said. I mean, I could see they cite it like, oh, there's a lot of people who work in law enforcement and fossil fuels,
Uh
right?
huh.
Like, so I can see that as a reason why they voted Republican. And then there's others, they talked about in Florida, um, how they um, got the socialism stuff might have worked in Florida, but that wasn't flipping anybody, right? That was people who were already Republican, right? Like
Right.
they keep dancing around this about Bernie, right? Like,
Well,
and lost the Democratic primary, but his embrace of socialism and Latin American leftist leaders was used in swing district races against congressional Democrats who lost seats in the House.
come on,
That's what I'm saying.
really?
They were trying to pretend that Bernie, after
They're,
overwhelmingly winning
we're like,
Latino
how could
voters,
we blame the left?
yeah, um,
Okay, so,
it's like
but
they
mhm.
have this, they
As the
don't
resident
have the
Latino
data.
on this show,
They don't have the data to blame the left, right? And they're
no, they
trying to
don't.
dance around it and just because they don't have to have the data, they just have to get people to think it's the left's fault. That's how Bernie lost the primary, right?
Yeah.
Was the people liked Bernie's policies more. They liked Bernie as a person more. He had much higher net positives, but they
Well,
were scared that he couldn't win,
well,
so they voted against him.
did you see the segment that Kyle did about Bill Maher, where he talked about the whole why the Democrats lost down ballot?
Yeah, I think I saw that.
Yeah, I mean,
Romar is just an idiot, though. Like
look,
he's
I
got
used to
such bad
really,
takes.
bro.
Like
I'm
he's
just
got
like,
no.
it's so hard right now. Like, maybe it's not as difficult as it was before, but I used to really enjoy Bill Maher. I like back
Yeah,
in the day. I
yeah.
really used to like Bill Maher. I used to fuck with him. Him, Jon Stewart. I even sometimes preferred Bill Maher's views on certain shit over Jon Stewart. I mean that. It was just it was part of my political upbringing and everything else about learning this shit where you start from a way, but I mean, where he's gone to at this point. I mean, he used to even have Bernie on his show, man. But now he's just,
He's a rich old white guy
he's
who's
just,
got conservative takes.
yeah,
Like
and he's just a rich old white guy who smokes pot now. I mean, yeah,
it's like
but
Dave Rubin.
yeah, exactly. PJ do still thinks it's the Bush years, but let's go to that Kyle video just so we can uh, show what he does have some part right, and then he goes off the fucking rails. So let's go here. Where's All right, all right. Let's go to Kyle. All right, Kyle.
Obviously, Joe Biden. Bill Maher has an analysis of the election for us. Obviously, Joe Biden beat Donald Trump, but down ballot, the Democrats did really bad. And even Biden underperformed. 306 electoral votes. It was supposed to be worst case scenario 320. The actual poll showed 351. So he underperformed. But down ballot, Democrats really underperformed. So Maher has some theories as to why that is. Let's watch.
Liberals can either write off half the country as irredeemable, or they can ask, what is it about a D next to a candidate's name that makes it so toxic? Let's ask Ruben Gallego. He's a congressman from Arizona, and he was asked how his Democrats could do a better job connecting to Latinos. He said, first, start by not using the term Latinx. which
Yeah.
the vast majority of Latinos have never heard of, and when they do, don't like it. Who
Okay.
likes it?
All right. Yeah,
Pandering
that's
white
true.
politicians
Yeah.
who mistake Twitter for real people.
Ugh.
And don't get it that Latinx is like fetch. You can try to make it happen, but it's never gonna.
Oh,
Oh my
dude.
god, it's like not funny either.
Oh, dude.
Even though he's correct on that,
Virginia
he's not
Congresswoman
funny.
Abigail Spanberger
Yeah.
said after the election, if we are classifying Tuesday as a success, we will get fucking torn apart in 2022. That's a
All right.
congresswoman.
Yeah. I mean, she's
Who
right.
said that,
She was
Spanberger?
urging
Yeah.
members not to talk
She's a
about
fucking
defunding
CIA
the
spook.
police.
There's no reason she
James
should be running in the
Clyburn
Democratic
agreed.
Party.
Defund the police
I
is
just don't
killing
understand.
our
Okay,
party.
now this part
Why
where
she has the...
Okay, there we go.
Pennsylvania
That's
Democrat
not right
Connor
either.
Leonard
Yeah,
says
no.
Democratic rhetoric
It might work with
needs to be
some,
dialed
you know, it
back.
might have
It needs
explained
to
a
be
handful
rooted
of
in
people,
common
but like
sense.
All right,
we did with the Clyburn
let's
segment
pause that
last
really
week.
fast. Okay, so yeah, okay, so they keep he did a thing right there where he crossed over the culture war shit with the whole with the defund the police thing, which actually is a good idea. And when you break down what the policy is or what the implementation of that would be, it would be popular. If you want to go ahead and say, let's reallocate funds to social work, to mental health professionals, that makes sense to people. Reallocation, actually, when you explain it that way, it makes sense to people when you're talking about defund the police. But then, but see, what Bill Maher did there was a real stupid thing, which is, okay, you're talking about Latinx, which, okay, I'm on board on. I hate that fucking term. You know, me as a fucking Latino, I hate that shit. But then you're going to go and cross it over to, that's the same as defund the police, and that's the same kind of detriment to the Democrats' chances in 2022? No.
They don't have data to prove the defund the police connection. That's what drives me nuts about all these, like, election...
He thinks the
like,
smugness is common.
like, that they have the data points to prove one thing, right?
Yeah,
like,
look, and yeah, to PJ's point, yeah, no Democrat really ran on defund the police. But the thing, the difference with AOC is she paid attention to the activists that were calling for it, and the only one that really did embrace that term to that point as an electoral measure, I guess, was Cori Bush, and she won. So yeah, you want to talk about defund the police? She's not shying away from it. She's going out there talking about defund your butts.
Yeah.
So,
but like it's a larger issue is allowing your opponent to define you, right? To come up with a narrative that people are going to think of.
Right, exactly.
And that's what the Democrats did, because they tried to run on not the Republicans, right? That was their basic strategy.
And it's the same answer that Joe Biden had to every time Trump would try to tie him to the far left. He would do everything to say, I'm not a far leftist. I'm not a socialist. I'm a neoliberal. I'm against the socialists. And it doesn't matter. You're painting yourself into a box anyway. You know, and from the jump, it's okay. And I keep going back to my experiences when I was on the Texas Platform Committee. It's the same kind of thing. They're gonna call us socialists. What are the Republicans gonna tell us? The Republicans are gonna define you any way they want to.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter what you do. You can run as a diet Republican. They're still gonna call you the lesser of two socialists at best.
That's what it is, and it's who knows like what sticks in people's head, like what is the thing that they're gonna keep in mind. But like all of this stuff doesn't help, and it's just when you go on your platform, your platform that you're for is saying Latinx, you know,
right?
Like defending Black Lives Matter. What else? Like what else would you say the Democrats affirmatively ran on? Like something that they were for?
I mean, it's all this culture war concession shit. You know, you can't, and it's the same thing that Andrew Yang was talking about when he was saying he was going around talking to people like truck drivers, right? And they were like, "Oh, you're a Democrat. You're not for working people." Is kind of the attitude.
Yeah.
Right.
No, yeah, exactly. People think of them as coastal elitists.
Yes.
And they can do that by trying to embrace the policies that people like. It's not hard to see, this policy polls well. We should run on that. Instead, they do the exact opposite. they start with their conclusions and try to backfill in, rationale
and then
for
when
it.
their bullshit of not standing for anything doesn't work, then their first instinct was, oh, it's the far left, it's the left, with their crazy radical, internationally moderate positions that are actually reasonable once you explain them to people. That's the problem. That's the real issue out here. That's why all the blue dogs lost and none of the people that signed on Medicare for all lost. But let's go back to Bill Maher now. Okay.
So wait a minute, they're trying to say that AOC called for a Goya boycott, and I don't think that's what the post that they're citing to say that is her quote tweeting the guy, the CEO at the White House.
Yeah.
And she says, "Oh, look, it's the sound of me Googling how to make your own, what is that? Adobo.
Adobo.
That's not her
like
calling for a boycott of Goya. Yeah, that's not her saying boycott Goya. That's her saying, like, I might consider not buying Goya. Like, it doesn't even say Goya. It's how to make your own adobo. And they're saying that is why.
You think
that's where the calls to the boycott come from.
Do you think they're just upset because they're not buying something?
I'm sure plenty of shit libs said to boycott Goya. I'm sure like the Don Winslows and like the losers like that all said to do it. But
what? I'm gonna
don't think any congressman said that.
Yeah, I mean, so what if I come on the stream and I teach y'all how to make like some El Paso guacamole, then I'm calling for a boycott of whoever makes it? I don't know. It seems like a stretch to me. But let me go back. To the Bill Maher thing. Let's see.
Thank you. There, in my opinion, is the crux of the problem. Democrats too often don't come across as having common sense to a huge swath of Americans.
Yeah, but that's true, though.
People who believe in QAnon. But as I've said before,
but that's true though, because they run on these like culture war issues that only matter to these academic, urban professionals.
Yeah, but like what Kyle is gonna say, in the video, he's gonna go ahead and mention this point. Everybody thinks they have common sense, and everybody thinks that their position is common sense. So I mean, he's not really saying.
No, the Democrats know. They know the strategist types. They know that nobody cares about this shit.
Right.
It's all virtue signaling, like you said. They're trying to show that they have a positive worldview and they're sympathetic to workers and they're sympathetic to the poor and the middle class because they're sympathetic on this esoteric culture war issue. Like, because they're pro-choice, then that means that they actually care about people or something. They're trying to make people, they're dog whistling their virtue, basically, right? Like, they're trying to imply that they're virtuous without going in on any kind of policy. And like, people just don't like bullshit. People hate bullshit from politicians, right? Like, even if it's the right kind of bullshit, like even if they were like,
even if it's very good bullshit,
even if they were disingenuously claiming to support Medicare for all, like that might be different because that's a strictly economic policy. But if it was like anti-war, right? People are strongly against war. People are strongly against the military budget. So if they were trying to imply that they were, that they were anti-war in like a sort of bullshit way, people would see through that, right? And if it's not, like, they need to specifically say what they're affirmatively for, not have people imply that they are, because it doesn't translate, right? It doesn't translate to anybody.
All right, let me play the thing through. We're gonna keep stopping him every time we think he's bullshitting.
You have to wear everything anyone on your side does. Republicans are the party
because you don't
wear
speak
masks,
to anything.
Kids in cages, lock her up, and Democrats are the party of every hypersensitive social justice warrior, woke bullshit story in the news. They're the party that disappears people or tries to make them apologize for ridiculous things. I talked to a guy in the Midwest once who told me this story about the day he went out to get his car in the supermarket parking lot, but couldn't back out because a mother and her very young daughter were standing behind his car, which was next to their car, which had a Hillary bumper sticker on it. and the little girl was screaming at her mother, who was profusely apologizing to the child. And he said to me, I just can't let people like that take over this country. That's what people vote on, not policy.
Oh,
Democrats kept saying in the campaign, you can't
He's right,
possibly
though.
think Trump is preferable to what we're selling. And many voters keep saying, yes, we can. In fact, our primary reason voting for him is to create a bulwark against you, because your side thinks silence is violence and looting is not. Because you're the party of chasing speakers off college campuses and making everyone walk on eggshells and replacing let's not see color with let's see it always and everywhere, formerly the position of the Ku Klux Klan. It would be so easy to win elections if we would just drop this shit.
good point, PJ.
Democrats need to listen to our new president-elect's old boss.
This idea of purity and you're never compromised and you're always politically woke and all that stuff, you should get over that quickly.
Quickly.
Like Obama's
before they
not
voted
very
Georgia.
smart, right? Like in a lot of ways, like his.
You know,
Let's see
I
what
love
Kyle
this
had to say
because
first.
there's zero evidence for any of the stuff he's saying.
Exactly.
Listen, I'm as anti-social justice
there's
warrior
evidence for the
as
Latinx
anybody.
thing.
I've done a
There
million
is
segments
evidence
on
for
that
that.
stuff on this
Hold on,
show
let me
because I think they
see
get
this.
ridiculous. But there's nobody ran on a platform of being a social justice warrior. You know? Nobody's out there forming a pink hair caucus. That's not a thing. Even the go-to examples that these people have been using, nobody ran on it. Nobody ran on defund the police. Nobody ran on that. Or actually, maybe one person ran on that, and that would be Cori Bush, and she won. But by and large, nobody ran on defund the police. This is what activists are saying in the streets. And they're saying it because in these particular communities, there have been really terrible issues with the police, like killing of unarmed people, or they feel like they're under some sort of military occupation. But nobody's running on these things. And so this analysis of the election, there's just no evidence for it. This assertion that, like, every time somebody looks at a Democratic politician, they see the most insane college social justice warrior on a campus kicking people out because they said something offensive. No, people care about their wallets. People care about COVID-19, their wages. I mean, it's all about the kitchen table issues. That's the bread and butter. But this like weird elite liberal analysis is sort of like denying a material analysis now and going right towards, hey, here's the thing that pisses me off because people yell at me when I make shitty jokes. And so now I'm going to extrapolate that as if it's the biggest issue in the election in the country. By the way,
No, the
they've looked
Republicans
into
do
a lot of this
that.
stuff, okay? And
They made
so there was
that an issue, and
I forget her
Democrats
name,
couldn't
but there was
respond.
a Democratic congresswoman who lost. And afterwards she said, it's because AOC and socialism, and this is why I lost. So Waleed Shahid of Justice Democrats went back and took a look. Let's see the ads that were ran against this Democratic congresswoman. Virtually everyone was about how she's corrupt. So the real issue, and by the way, she is corrupt. So the real issue was a Democrat was corrupt. It was called out by the Republican. So the Republican won. And then they turn around and go, AOC and socialism. No, it's your fault because you're corrupt. But more importantly, and this is the most important point, Bill, the problem in the election was the Democrats ran on platitudes, cliches, and Trump bad. And it turns out platitudes, cliches, and Trump bad only get you Trump defeated barely with Biden underperforming, and down ballot the Democrats did terrible. The whole argument from the Democrats for the past few years have been Trump is really, really, really bad, but it's okay because other Republicans are great. Now watch me snuggle up to Mitt Romney and Jeff Flake and John Kasich. Well,
All right. Yeah, I mean, look, there's a couple of things there that I wanted to go back to. So Bill Maher made that point about, okay, people don't vote on policy, which I don't think is
They
true
would
at
if you
all.
gave them policy
exactly,
to vote for.
Exactly. They would if you made the argument on policy. Like if Joe Biden goes into Florida and runs on a living wage, then maybe his final vote total will look more like the way that the living wage vote looked. You know, if you're not gonna go ahead and run on any kind of policy, you're not gonna define yourself like you're talking about, Matt.
Yeah.
Then you're gonna get defined in a caricature by a Republican, and the Republican is gonna paint you as what you're not wanting to look like, Bill Maher, which is a social justice warrior with the pink hair and a pussy hat. That's exactly what they're gonna picture you as, because you're not defining yourself. You're not running on anything. It's exactly what Kyle said. You're a bunch of platitudes and cliches and Trump bad. And for what he's talking about with that congressperson, in that case, you're not owning your own corruption. If you get owned in a campaign and by a bunch of attack ads that are pointing out how shady your dealings are, then maybe that's the fucking problem. Maybe you gotta own that. You gotta hang that L up on your resume, because you know what, you made your own fucking bed by that point.
Yeah. No, but I don't know if they are just incapable of doing anything real, because I don't think that they don't want to take the side of anything. They don't want to support a policy that they can't get passed, because then they think that makes them look like losers, right? Mm-hmm. They don't want to say, oh, we're going to do Medicare for all, and then turn out they can't get it passed, because then they think that they look terrible for not being able to do it. But the problem was not that they're losers, because they are losers, right?
Right.
They don't get anything as it is. The problem was that they don't stand for anything. Like Bernie said in that PBS segment, right? It's like, if you allow them to define you, if you allow them to make the conception of yourself that that sticks in the voter's head, then whatever the Republicans say, oh, they're, you're the bad kind of socialist who wants to, make everything, like some pink-haired college kids, woke-splaining,
right.
That's going to stick. If you try to run on, I'm not what those guys are, it doesn't matter how much you deny it, that's still going to stick in people's heads. You have to be for something. You have to, instead of saying, oh no, we're not going to defund the police, you have to explain what that is about. You have to explain the issue to people. The same thing with everything. They went with that, instead of demonizing Bernie in the primary for saying a very rational take on Castro, which was Obama's official stance, right? That was their stance for 8 years, and then because they wanted to use it to beat Bernie with, they had to
ramp up
all of a sudden flip flop, right?
Exactly.
Be like, Castro was always bad. Everything about him was bad.
Yeah, you can't even talk about his what do you call it, literacy program.
Literacy, but the kind of voters who are going to assume that because you said Castro was okay on this one issue, that means that you're a rampaging socialist, right? Mm-hmm. Those people were never going to vote for you. It's the same with the defund the police, right?
Yes.
It's those people who support law and order and beating protesters and all, they were never going to vote for you. They were always going to be right wingers, right?
Of course. But you have to
reach the other people. Right?
But these people don't really need to go all that far back for evidence of what happened over here. We look at how Bernie performed among Latinos. Look at how he did.
Because he spoke to real shit. So yeah, you can have that whole scenario Bill Maher pointed out with a mom apologizing with a Hillary bumper sticker and all that kind of bullshit. But if you come out and the candidate that's in your district is running on a platform that involves real, like Kyle mentioned, tabletop issues, whatever it is, you're talking about Medicare for all, living wage, any of those kind of things, then that shit's not gonna matter as much. It's gonna be some rando that you ran into in the parking lot. It's not gonna be a voting issue. I'm trying to look at PJ's comment down here. Even if Biden embraced that $15 minimum wage, he barely talked about it.
Right.
And he didn't he didn't make it the focus of his thing. I still think the main problem was that they were trying to appeal too much to those suburban theoretical moderate Republican types. They were trying to craft a message that would not offend their base, not contradict anything that they was in the actual platform, but then also message so that, you know, a 1995 Republican would vote for you. And I think that was the problem, because it just made everything you said sound like empty bullshit. It just made everything you said just sound like, you know, the not sympathetic, not you know, not believable, not plausible. Like, and it's just like this gets every time we talk about this, you go back into the feedback loop with the consultants, right? Their business, like their hustle is this kind of messaging, this kind of vague platitudes, this vague virtue signaling campaigns. That's what they do. Like that's their racket 24/7. That's what they sell to other clients. That's why they're going to continue doing this shit, and they're not going to learn. No matter how much people say you need to speak to workers' everyday issues, they're not going to be able to adjust themselves to that because they don't want to, right? Like they want to keep it as it is. Like they would rather lose than actually appeal to people's material needs. You know, and I think that it's like in order to be a mainstream Democratic candidate, you have to basically already be rich and in those circles, right? Like you need to have X number of dollars to be able to run. Like it's like $250K or whatever just to put your name on the ballot, just to get signed up with the DCC. You have to have rich friends. Like they don't let you run. That segment was about how they pick candidates. You have to like go through the Rolodex and find how many rich people they're friends with. Like that's real. So these people, if you're getting into the position, like if you're John Ossoff, right, you are, that's what you care about, right? You're a rich guy who cares about other rich guy stuff. Right. It's very hard to get a grassroots candidate, and they're going to do everything they can to demonize you and not help. And like it doesn't really matter how progressive or not you are, because you're going to be stuck with the regular parties, you know, their consultants, all of that stuff with that is their messaging. Yeah. Well, so it's just
let's see what PJ said here. So there's a false feedback loop here though, where because Bill Maher says life ain't Twitter. Yeah, no shit. But a lot of media relies heavily on Twitter for the leads and for their leads and content, which they then push out of the on all the other mediums. So is it a matter of Twitter just being Twitter, getting amplified to something more than it is or should be?
No. You know, life is Twitter. Like I kind of hate that expression. Yeah. People say like life ain't Twitter or Twitter ain't real life and all. First of all, because it's not true. Like in the primaries when I was canvassing, and like I remember talking to you when I was in Iowa, I'd like, you know, election night, I'd like come back to my hotel room after like, you know, knocking doors all day and then running the, you know, doing the precinct captain and talking to voters, real voters all day. I still had no idea how it was going to go, right? Because I only had met the people I talked to. Right. So I'd only talked to a couple hundred people. So what did I do? I looked on Twitter to see what other organizers were doing. So I don't see how it's not real life. I mean, in the you know, in the aggregate, right? Like, you add up all the different experiences. What's not life is a mainstream journalist, right? That might not be life to them, right? Because they're presenting this version of themselves that they want the other professionals to take in, right? But like real people who are just using Twitter, I think are mostly pretty real, right? You know, I don't lie on Twitter, you know, like I'm sure some people exaggerate.
Well, you know, there is a little bit of a dynamic though that you do see on Twitter where you see people kind of being real hyper cognizant of what they say on there because they don't want to get canceled for some shit that they say. I mean, you know, so you have a little bit of that where they kind of put a public image up there that they feel is more acceptable. But I mean, by and large, when you're talking about your views and what you believe in and where you land on certain issues, or when you're just talking, I mean, you land where you land. And by and large, when you're talking about these changes or even policies that you're that go around in different Twitter circles, there's a consensus that mirrors national polling. So